Hey everybody, Scott Costa, publisher of TED Magazine. We have another video podcast for you with the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. Appreciate everybody joining us and following along. We're having Mark McGready back. Mark is the Director of Strategic Analytics for Sparks IQ. I had him on about a month or so ago. We talked a lot about the need for data, obviously in the middle of a pandemic. Had a great conversation with him. If you get a second, go back, check that one out, because it was worth listening to. And a lot of you did. And as a result of so many of you watching or listening to that podcast, I decided to have him back on again because we had to talk about what to do when you have that data. And so he talked a lot about fish and how it applies to data. Trust me, it all makes sense. You're going to want to watch this. He actually did a great job, and it's a great pod. He's a great guest, and I enjoy having him on the podcast. And speaking of data, I really got to talk to you guys about the NAD Market Data Program. The NAD Market Data Program is a service where electrical distributors submit confidential, anonymous, monthly point of sales data. Users are then able to see the market values by region, product, or customer type. Users are only able to see the aggregated market data when there is enough data flowing into the system to maintain anonymity. The Market Data Program recently began displaying its first state data for Illinois, North Carolina, and Virginia, and more data is expected soon as more distributors begin submitting their data. If you want more information about the Market Data Program, go to nad.org/market-data to get that information. And now let's talk more about data and what you should be doing with it with Sparks IQ's Mark McGready. Mark McGready, the Director of Strategic Analytics, back with us on the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. You were on the podcast a few weeks ago. Great podcast that we had a ton of views and a ton of downloads. So thanks for doing that, Mark. And we talked about the importance of data, which was great, but then we got to kind of thinking and talking, and we said, you know what, we should probably talk about what you should be doing with that data. And I know you want to talk about fishing. I'm pretty excited to see what you got here.
Yeah. I got to make it a story. If I talk about data, it's boring. So
yeah. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to have you come back on. So have at it. I know you want to share your screen. So have at it. I'll ask some questions along the way, but go get them as we talk about, what you should be doing with your data. Go ahead and share away.
Yeah, can you see my screen okay?
I cannot see your screen yet, no. You have to click the button there at the bottom where it says share screen.
Right. I'm creating confidence in my reputation as a data guy. There we go.
And I see it.
Okay, let's see if we can full screen this. All right, perfect. Yeah, we talked last time about data, and I've been talking about this endlessly, and I get a lot of people nodding their heads and agreeing, but at the end of the day, you have to turn it into something actionable. And I think that's where a lot gets lost with the opportunity with data, in that how do you take all of this information and all of these transactions and boil that down to somebody actually doing something that makes a difference in the company. So I thought I would try and walk through that process a little bit, and to try and make it a little bit more interesting, we're going to talk about this in the context of fishing. And it makes sense, hopefully, or else this is going to be a terrible podcast, but we'll see.
It'll be fine. I'll throw in some questions. We'll be good. Go ahead.
So the first and most important thing about fishing is understanding what you're good at, understanding what your fishing skills are and where you're successful and where you're unsuccessful. And so I think that's the beginning step of understanding the information and the sales in your company. Now, a lot of companies obviously get reporting today where they can see their sales by customer segment or the sales by product line or all of that sort of stuff, but that's kind of telling you what your customers are. I really want to get into who your customers are and why your customers are. What's their behavior like? So to try and put that in some context, I'm suggesting that people divide the customers into 5 different groups. The first one is the easy one, your whales. Every distributor out there has a couple of whale accounts that they've worked with for years and years and years. They add a huge amount to the revenue of the business. They are incredibly important. They are incredibly strategic. You do anything for them, and you want to make sure you take care of those whales as much as possible. One of the good things about them is that they tend to be communicative. They're reliable. They're stable. You're as important to them as they are to you, but your whales are critical, and you want to monitor their health. You want to monitor to see if any of them are starting to drift or if they're suffering in the post-COVID era. And you also got to identify where you're going to find your next whale in case one of them disappears, because it only takes one or two of those businesses to be poached or to move away, and all of a sudden you've got a big chunk in the revenues of the companies. So take care of the whales, save the planet, save the whales. You have sharks. And if I say your customer's a shark, everybody knows what that means. They're the guys that are going to be shopping around on price or convenience or whatever it might be. They're not really loyal to one distributor. They'll go to one to the other as needed. They are important customers to try and capture. You don't want to do without them, but at the same time, you want to understand their nature and how you drive that relationship, because it's not strategic. They have different things that are important to them. Then you have my favorite category, your tropical fish. These are your weird customers who have complex sales and complex businesses, who need specific product lines, are meeting specific technical challenges. They get SPA contracts to get a special pricing for what they're buying. They've got certain applications and certain obscure kind of customer bases that they're trying to service. And you need to learn who they are, know who they are, become product experts, and be able to drive that kind of consultative relationship with those guys. And then understand the dynamics within what those guys look like today. And then you have your normal, everyday, regular tuna fish customers, which are the guys that are reliable, they're profitable, they're easy to take care of, they're the backbone of your business. They're going to be the bulk of the customer base that your salespeople are working with, and you just want to take care of them. And then you get your minnows. And your minnows are your little customers that a lot of distributors don't really pay attention to or think about. Some of them will remain minnows, just going from one distributorship to the other and not buying a lot of material. Some of them could be sharks or whales hidden under the surface. You just don't quite know. But you want to get an understanding of where this account fits into the hierarchy of things. And the reason why I talk about this is that I think it's important for a distributorship to understand how much of their revenues is tied up into whales. How much of it really is the largest accounts where you need to have stable account management relationship. You need to have stable, reliable product availability, and you've got a strategic alliance and a strategic relationship with that customer. Do they have the phone number of the CEO to call at any time? Do they have certain products that you guarantee to have in stock? What can you do to make sure that their business is not destabilized at any given time? Compared to how much of a business is tropical fish, for example, which are more costly to serve and more complex to serve, require a lot of product lines that are not going to move very frequently, so they're going to have a higher operational cost. So how do you recognize that as you work with these accounts, and how do you recognize that from the profitability from those accounts too? Do your inside salespeople and outside salespeople understand and recognize the customers that cost a lot more to support than the guys who cost every single day? So if they're facing bringing in new products, or they're overriding pricing, or whatever the things they might be doing, are they taking into account that this is someone that we need to make a little bit more margin on in order to be able to support serving this business? Or if your sales guys are treating everyone kind of the same, to me that essentially means they're getting everyone wrong. So you want to make sure that they understand where they fit. So this is a different spin. I think it's a more meaningful spin in understanding your business and just knowing how much is resi and commercial, industrial, and OEM. When we do things that way, we draw assumptions about how we call a resi customer compared to a commercial customer compared to an OEM customer. And those assumptions aren't really always right. I think the behaviors of the customers are a little bit more telling. So what do I mean by that from a data standpoint? Well, really what I'm talking about is understanding the buying behaviors of the customers. How do they buy? Do they buy weekly or monthly and frequently? Do they buy a certain small range of SKUs, or do they buy hundreds of SKUs across the board? How stable is their business? How reliable is their monthly projection of purchases, or quarterly projection of purchases? And with that, then, how much can you project that they're still stable and steady, or that there is some sort of turbulence in the water? If you're working with a shark account, for example, a shark account could come along and you could get $100,000 from them and then hear nothing for 46 months, and then they show up again with another $100,000. You don't want to have a system that triggers that there's a problem with that customer. It's just the nature of how that customer is buying from you. You just want to have a marketing strategy and plan and process to be able to call on them as needed. Whereas if you've got a tropical fish customer who's buying $25,000 worth of product from you regularly every month, and all of a sudden that starts to fall off the side, that can tell you, okay, there is an issue underlying here with this particular piece of business that I need to address. And it also then looks at the kind of product that they're buying as well. The whale is usually buying the complete range of products that they can from you. The shark's going to buy where they can get the best pricing and they can buy the best service. But in all of these different guys, you want to make sure that they're utilizing the range of products that you have. Maybe you want to carry some products that they're looking for that they have to source from somewhere else. Or maybe they're not aware of some of the capabilities that you have as an organization. So understanding these behaviors in your data, suddenly you're able to start building a marketing strategy or an engagement strategy with these customers. And obviously with that becomes identification of the opportunities or threats that might come along with that piece of business. We're just looking at what you have today. In this analogy of comparing with fishing, one of the main things you want to do to protect your revenue is just serve what you have rather than chasing the next customer, the next great thing. I think a lot of effort, probably the majority of your time, should go into maintaining the relationships that you have right now, because acquiring a customer is a lot more expensive than just trying to support a piece of business. And these data trends will be able to let you see underlying where you might be running into some turbulent waters. So ultimately, we're talking about reducing the loss rate with these accounts. I'll get into a little bit in a second and how you can analyze the data a little bit further to understand their behaviors. But ultimately, know where your fishing skills are and know who you are as a company is the number one thing that I think needs to come from data analysis. Because to be honest, I've seen so much data, looked at so many different transaction sets and been able to gone back to companies and tell them things about themselves that they didn't know because they hadn't studied it in their own data. And to me, it's critically important to know the nature of your business, how you sell, the range of products that you sell. For example, how much of your business is truly sold from stock compared to sold from non-stock? How much of your business is commodity-based compared to specific? How much of your product lines are selling to less than 5% of the diversity of customer basket that you have? So you're really reliant on just a handful of customers to support that product line. And what should that do for your inventory? Or what does that do with your utilization line? What are you missing out? So there's a wealth of truths about your company just lying there in the data behind the scenes.
Okay. Hey, quick question, and you may be answering it later on, so I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here, but is of the 4 fish you've got, the sharks, the whales, the tuna, and the tropical fish, not counting the minnows because you don't know they really exist, is there a percent, you should have, I'm making it up here, 25% of each one? I mean, is there a percentage of how many whales compared to tuna?
You are unique. You are a special snowflake as a distributor. So trying to be like everyone else is where you go wrong. This is another thing where people get power reports or they get NAD reports and they kind of want to know what the average looks like, and everyone wants to look a little bit better than average. But if you are a distributorship serving the New York marketplace, you shouldn't look like a distributorship serving the Nashville marketplace or something like that. I don't think there is a clear delineation of how many of each kind that you should have. In fact, I think you should look at your data and it'll tell you who you are rather than trying to be something else. Now, when you see where you are, you might have a problem with it. If 80% of your revenue is a shark business, that's a very unstable business. That is, you're always dealing on price. You're always going to have to cut corners. You're always desperate for that next sale kind of a thing. That's not a steady, reliable business. And you may want to start looking and say, okay, what do we need to do to move into serving more OEM segment where I can start getting some of that more long-term complex sale where we'll become a dependable partner? Or how do we get a couple of large accounts? What do we need to do as an organization from an investment, from a pricing standpoint, to be able to partner with a large contract or a large motor facility or something like that? So understanding who you are may change the tactic of where you want to go, but there is no rule that says you should be, 30% this and 20% this. That's a mistake to think. It's really down to what you want your business to be.
Okay, thanks. Keep going.
Okay, so we've talked about understanding your fishing skills, and then the number one rule of fishing is fish where the fish are. This is cavemen were telling each other to fish where the fish are. It seems fairly obvious, and yet I don't know if it's always the case. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that your data will tell you where the fish are. Well, obviously, we're in a post-COVID marketplace. We've seen a lot of destabilization. Our fish tank has had some poison water in it, and right now we're trying to figure out which fish have survived and which fish are in trouble and who can be revived again. So you need to have a look at what business has changed in 2020, and then you have to make a decision on what's going to return next year and what's not going to return. So do you need to change your focus? Do you need to start fishing for a different kind of thing? You can't just close your eyes and wait till winter and then hopefully everything will go back to where it was in 2019 next year. There will be a lot of movement in your customer base. And I've talked about the need to write plans and set agendas and that sort of stuff. That's going to kick in with your response to where your business is now and what you want to look at at the end of 2021 and 2022. And also that is not going to be a national strategy. It may not even be a regional strategy. That's most likely going to be a branch by branch strategy. One of the challenges, but one of the benefits of data is embracing the complexity and understanding where one branch is going to be compared to another branch is. You cannot set the tone for your entire business across the board. If you're a distributorship with 20 or 30 or more branches, you cannot set the tone for everyone to go in the same direction. They're all going to be in different places, and the data will tell you that. Break them into 3 or 4 groups, for example, and it's a little bit easier to get specific about, is a branch, they're going to return, everything is fine, or this branch has an issue with personnel, they don't have the right salespeople, they had to let some people go. Is there geographical issues, or pricing issues, or product offering issue? But every branch will have its own path, and then you want to look for commonality between branches, not even in the same marketplaces, but just with the same personas and the same behaviors. One of the things that's really easy to run, that's very insightful, is just building a buying pattern model for your customers. So if you have your customers grouped, as I've suggested, by the behavior of how they buy from you, build a model of what their purchase portfolio looked like in using 2018 data, and then build another model using 2019 data and see if it's the same model. If it's the same, then you have a good understanding of the product ranges and the buying patterns of these customers. If it's changing, well, then you got to figure out the dynamics of that change. You really want to spend some time to get an understanding of what's happening with the shifts in products, or shifts in the buying behaviors, or shifts in the buying levels, or whatever it might be. Is that down to 1 or 2 accounts that are kind of dragging everything else down? Or is it a symptom of how the market is changing for your business and your business is not changing for the marketplace? So consistency in these models from one year to the next is one of the things that I like to run. It really puts proof to some of the conclusions that you may draw. Trying to make a conclusion based on 1 year alone can be dangerous. 2018 and 2019 from an economic standpoint were mostly similar. 2020, of course, is all over the place, but the comparison between those 2 years should introduce a lot of stability, and that'll come through in your data. If you have that model and you compare it to 2020, and it'll tell you exactly, pinpoint how things have changed from where they were in the past to where they are today. You'll see product lines that are falling away, customers that are falling away, revenues that are not where they need to be. And while some of this may be obvious, and some of this may be common sense, I understand the value of experience, particularly in an industry like this, where we have an awful lot of long-term experienced people, but nothing is truer than data. And experience can get you in trouble because it will make an assumption, and we all know about assumptions. So backing up and looking at what the data says is either a good gut check to confirm what you think, or it's a reality check to challenge what you're thinking. All of this is a setup to say fish where the fish are. As you're making your plan and your investments for next year, understanding these models and where things have shifted will let you know where to prioritize for 2021 and 2022. It may mean bringing in new product lines. It may mean having to change the specialty of your business. It may mean getting some of your sales guys to be experts in new products that have come in that they weren't experts on previously. But you have the answers sitting in front of you. You can look them up and you can figure out exactly what the path is. To me, if you fail a test and you have the answer sitting beside you, then it's on you for failing the test. Everyone has the answer sitting in this database, and the data's not that difficult to be able to analyze and pull. And so I think everyone owes it to themselves to plan next year by looking at the answers that are provided to them and analyzing the data this year.
I'm good with this. Okay, keep us moving. That makes sense.
So basically the summary is, again, looking at the customer's buying behaviors, define the consistent characteristics year to year and compare that to where things have happened in 2020. And then from there, define what's going to return compared to what is lost and what you need to do to try and make up for that. Look at where your business has remained strong or where it has thrived or where it is growing in this challenging era and build upon that. Compare that to where the business has been fraught and difficult and make the decision to either try and get that back again or replace that with something else. If a whale or two has disappeared, it's hard to find a whale and you may not be able to get another one to replace them again. So you got to look for something else to try and bring that in. If the sharks are all over the place, then don't have your sales guys focusing and chasing that business. That business will come to you. But if you're chasing it all the time, you could be misfiring a lot and wasting a lot of days when you could be going to somewhere that's a little bit more ripe with opportunity. Really picking your battles is critically important. And one more thing I'd add to this stage is when you use this methodology, when you're looking at this analysis, you've got to share the findings with everyone and you've got to share the techniques with everyone. Everyone has to be bought into this. Far too often I will analyze data and I will come back and I'll make a declaration of some kind about what a company is doing and where it's behaving. And often it's contrary and it's challenging conventional beliefs. If everyone's not on board and agreeing, then forever and always this truth in the data will be questioned as that can't be right. There has to be a mistake somewhere. And then you get the 5 stages of acceptance. There's going to be a lot of anger and bargaining and depression and that sort of stuff in between. So sharing, this is a methodology, this is how we did it, this is what our findings were. Matter of factly, numerically and plainly, we are an industry mostly of engineers. We do love mathematics. We can't deny that numbers are numbers. And sharing that and getting everyone on board can help then change the behavior where needed to respond to what the data is finding.
So this does not analyze products, it analyzes customers. So in other words,
yes.
You go back and say, well, of course we did great in the second quarter of whatever year, 2018, because so-and-so and so-and-so manufacturers launched new products and they were a big hit. It's not about the products, it's about your customers' behaviors. So you take you take that out of the equation, you just take your customer data is the full equation, correct?
That to me is the customers drive the products don't drive the customers. In this industry, in the most part, I think it's the customer relationships. We have some product lines that are new and exciting, but if we're all honest with ourselves, we're selling the same products we've been selling forever, for generations now. It is not a lot of technology innovation, and so the customers are the most important dynamic in the data, not how the products behave. The products are disconsequential. Okay, last one is eat the whole fish. And it's a fairly simple concept. As Jerry Mouse is illustrating, if you have a fish on the hook, make sure you make as much use of it as possible. You're probably getting that with the whales already. So your relationship, your account management with them is just to talk about how best to serve and support their business ongoing. With the sharks, understanding what's important to them. How can you shortcut their process to get your unfair share of their business? What are they looking for? Is it they need a fast response with the best price? Is it they need to have their questions answered on a product? Whatever it might be. But how can you make that hunting process as short as possible? What operationally do you need to do? That's where I would focus on for the shark business. For the tropical fish, it's sitting down with some of your smart guys in the room and talking about their technical challenges and their technical needs and how you can help their business grow beyond with new product lines or new relationships or new vendors or new solutions. Tuna is where you get into the product line utilization. You know, they're coming, they're going, they're buying from you. They're probably buying from 2 or 3 different distributors. So understand what they buy from you, compare them to their peers and what they're buying as well. And that's where you can do a simple product line utilization to say, okay, they buy wire, they buy pipe, they don't buy fittings. We should be selling them fittings. Somebody's got to talk to them about whose fittings they're buying today and what we need to do to be able to acquire that business. And the minnows, I mean, ultimately you need to make a decision. Are they just little fish that you let go behind the scenes? Or is it worthwhile having an inside salesperson or having some sort of kind of a basic marketing campaign or basic drive to work with those accounts? They'll probably have a lot of destabilization from one year to the next. They don't live long. They come and they disappear, and then somebody else comes along. But do we want to farm that piece of business and try and get a little bit more out of it and make them grow into bigger, stronger fish? Ultimately, every customer will have their own growth plan, which sounds incredibly complicated, but they have similar behaviors. So it's not a matter of having 1,000 different growth plans for 1,000 different distributors. It's identifying where that customer is, putting them in the same bucket as 200 other guys, and saying, this is what we want to do with these 200 accounts. This is what we want to do with these 300 accounts, and so on and so forth. And the data will identify and drive that. And here we get into the specific details of how you can do that, examining the range and comparing them to their peers, build their portfolios of their product diversity over the past couple of years rather than just using a small amount of data in isolation. Studying your SPA contracts and your opportunity of your SPA contracts is a whole other hour of talking, so I'm not going to get into it. Suffice to say, if you have a SPA, you get a special price, you've got an advantage in the marketplace. You want to be utilizing that as much as you can. And then identifying product underutilization. One of the things that's always been remarkable to me about SPAs, and I've been with them for a long time, is the average utilization of a SPA contract is less than 3 or 4% of the total products available. Manufacturers will set these broad, deep discounts across the board for an account because they don't really know what they're buying. So a SPA could be 500 different SKUs, and the customer is buying 10 or 15 of them. So either you're going to give away price unnecessarily by discounting it for something he's buying infrequently, or the customer doesn't understand the full opportunity of the discount that they have available, and you're not communicating that in clearly. So SPA efficiency is one of those big radars that I look for to say, how much are they buying compared to how they could buy? And that tells me whether I've done a good or bad job with that particular pricing strategy. So with all of this analysis, it can't stay in a power user's hands. You have to be able to transform this into something that can get in the hands of your worker base, the guys that are going out and talking to the customers. So either that's through marketing or that's through operations, but you want to be looking at methodologies to be able to digest all of this analysis into a simple action that says, do this with this guy, ask this guy about this, which you can do. Your power user can translate it all to that final point, but your power user is not going to be calling on 1,000 customers. So don't forget to spend some time in figuring out the internal process that'll work for you, from driving the analysis into action and getting in the hands of the people that are going to make a difference in your business. And the last thought, I kind of, to torture this analogy just a little bit further, they talk about giving a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. They talk about teaching a man to fish and he may eat for a lifetime. Whereas I think if he just bought him a fish farm, or if he built his own fish farm, he would never have to look for fish ever again. And that's really what you need your business to be, is something where your revenues are always being driven from analyzing your existing customer base, understanding who you are, where you're successful, where your strength is, and then being able to take that competitive advantage to steal everybody else's dinner.
All right, so I have a quick question. If you can go back 2 slides real quick. First of all, I was initially enthralled by Jerry the Mouse eating the entire piece of cheese there. Thanks for the distraction. But secondly, for those who know Tom and Jerry's, but secondly, let's talk a little bit about the data, and again, the way we're getting the most out of every account, because I guess I have a general fear of either having incorrect data or not analyzing the data properly. What happens when you're treating a tropical fish like a tuna, or you're treating like a shark? I mean, I'm a little bit, what happens there if you're not analyzing properly?
Well, that can happen if you start just calling people a resi guy or a commercial guy or an OEM guy, because customers are more complex than that. It's a bit like, describing people. You can't just really describe people as this or that or the other thing. We're more complex and customers are the same. So that's why I've suggested trying to break down and understanding what your business is and what your customers really look like, and starting from there. So the way to do that is, if you divide your customers by the range of SKUs that they're buying, if you divide your customers by the amount of transactions that they make with you, so you get an understanding of their buying behavior and their buying pattern. And then if you cross-reference that against the range of products that they're buying, how many of them are buying some of the more slow-moving items. I mean, a shortcut way of doing this is you know which items in your inventory are A's, B's, C's, and D's. So you can take your customers on one axis and you can say, okay, how frequently do they buy? How many SKUs do they buy? Let's give them a score out of 10. So a 10 is somebody who's buying frequently and buys a lot of SKUs. And a 2 is somebody who buys infrequently and only buys a small range of SKUs.
Mark, great stuff. And I appreciate you, passing along what we should be doing, and the fish and the Tom and Jerry GIF. That was all great. Thanks for doing that. I think folks are going to have a lot more questions, though, than just me, and that's great. So if you want to share this presentation, that you did for us, or if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to track you down these days?
The best place is probably LinkedIn to start off with. There's still only one Mark McGready, I think, in there. McGready. Email is mark.mcgrady@sparksiq.com, but most people don't remember emails, so you can find me on LinkedIn. And if they want to give me a call, the number is 630-362-6720. And always happy to help and always happy to talk about this kind of thing. I think there's tremendous opportunity, and whatever I can do to help companies realize it makes my day.
And since we're doing a video podcast too, I'll put that information down there at the bottom of the screen too, so folks can pause the video if they want. They can write down your email address or write down the phone number and get in touch with you, and we can go from there. So Mark, again, huge thank you. I always enjoy talking with you. And one day we're gonna be in the same room at the same time at some point in our lives.
Well, I think we'll be saying that for a few more months, but one day it'll be true, and we'll all be delighted when it is.
I think it will. Mark, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Scott. All the best.
All right, bye now. Like I said, great podcast. Great to have Mark McGready on. Talk about data. He knows everything you need to know. He's a smart guy. It's always great to get that information from him. Just a reminder, if you want to get some information from TED Magazine, from me about this podcast, other podcasts, if you want information on the magazine, information from our website, certainly you can get in touch with me 2 ways. 1, send me an email, scosta, SCOSTA @NEAD.org. Send me an email. I'll be glad to answer to it. Or got my phone. I'm in my office. Here it is. Give me a phone call. I don't mind hearing from you. Area code 314-812-5311. Give me a shout. We'll talk for a little bit. Have a great conversation. I'd love to hear from you. And just a reminder about NEAD's Market Data Program. The program is a service where electrical distributors submit confidential, anonymous, monthly point of sales data. Users are then able to see market values by region, product, or customer type. Users are only able to see the aggregated market data when there is enough data flowing into the system to maintain anonymity. That's a big one. The Market Data Program recently hit a milestone. It's now displaying its first state data for Illinois, North Carolina, and Virginia, and more data is expected soon. As more distributors are submitting their data, if you want to find out more about the Market Data Program, go to NEAD.org/market-data, NEAD.org/market-data, and find out more about the Market Data Program. Until we get a chance to talk again, thanks everybody for listening and watching the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast.